We are Portlife Church. Our vision is to bring life to the Port community and beyond. We do this by knowing, loving and serving our God, our church, our college, our community and our world.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jason, and it's fantastic that you can you're able to come here to join us this morning. Okay, well, we have quite a few notices this morning. First of which is our Graves to Gardens Easter weekend. So we're going to be celebrating Good Friday this year on Thursday, the 1st of April at 7 p.m, so a night service that day. And after the service, we're going to be enjoying some nice hot cross buns, and our Seaview campus will be joining us for that night as well. Next up from that, we have Easter Sunday, and that's going to be on the 4th of April at 10 a.m, so normal service time that day. We're going to have some chocolate eggs for all the chocolate lovers that are here. And there's also going to be a special kids program where they're going to go on an Easter hunt to tell the Easter story. All right, next after that, we have a very special 1 week only youth service. And that is going to be on the 11th of April, I believe. Yep. And we're going to have, we're very excited to have Nathan Dubbs. He's going to come and speak, and he's going to be kicking off our faith series. So that special service will start at 4 p.m, and we're doing that deliberately so that when the youth, when they come back from camp in the morning, that they're going to be able to join us for that. So, yeah. Please make sure that you join us for that, which promises to be a fantastic time. But I'd also just like to take this opportunity to thank you all very, very much for your faithful giving over the years. Since the time that I've been here at Portlife, I've seen just how generous that our church is. Just want to let you know that we don't take it for granted. It helps pay for the facilities that we get to enjoy and helps us to be able to do what we do as a church family. So thank you very much for that. If you would like to give, you can give in two ways. You can either give online, or you'll notice that there's two offering mailboxes which are located at the back of the auditorium. There's a little envelope there where you can just tick on the box where you'd like your offering to go, and please just make sure that it goes into the offering box. That would be great. Alrighty. Well, it's also my pleasure this morning to introduce our senior pastor, Josh Poyzer. He's going to be sharing with us this morning. He's going to be continuing on with the series, and he's going to be speaking of Unashamed. So could we please all welcome Josh as he comes to the stage.
Yes, that's right. This morning I'm speaking on Unashamed, and so I thought we're going to talk about the Adelaide Crows. Any complaints? No. It's been a while, you're right. I probably won't be talking like this next week, I assure you. Pride comes before a fall, so but I thought I'd better get that in. No, I'm not going to talk about the Adelaide Crows as much as I'd love to, but today we're going to start with a small passage that the Apostle Paul wrote to the church in Rome in around 57 AD. I'm going to be using the New Living Translation. You're welcome to use whatever you like. Could I possibly get a little bit of house light? Is that possible? Just a little bit? I don't need to see everybody, but there we go. I just wanted to know that I'm not the only person in the room, so that's great. So the passage I'm going to look at today is Romans 1, verses 14 to 17. So let's have a look at it. And this is what Paul writes. For I have a great sense of obligation to people in both the civilized world and the rest of the world, to the educated and the uneducated alike. So I'm eager to come to you in Rome too to preach the good news. For I am not ashamed of this good news about Christ. It is the power of God at work, saving everyone who believes, the Jew first and also the Gentile. This good news tells us how God makes us right in his sight. This is accomplished from start to finish by faith. That's the passage that I want to look at today. And really, if we're talking about the book of Romans, it is really a book that is centered around the good news. The good news, I've got it on the screen for you in a real little summary in case you're wondering, what does he mean if you're not used to church and you're not sure about the lingo? The good news is this. All people are sinners. That's not the good news. Everyone needs to be saved from their sin. Jesus is the only one that can save people. And anyone who believes in Jesus will be saved. And then we need to let people know. But Paul says in verse 15, so I'm eager to come to you in Rome to preach the good news. He's saying, I am actually eager to do this. I'm eager to tell people about Jesus. Why? Well, he gives us two reasons. Number one, because he believes that as a Christian, it is his obligation to tell others about Jesus. And number two, because he says, I'm unashamed. Says in verse 15, so I am eager to come to you to preach the good news, for I am not ashamed of this good news about Christ. Paul was very clearly unashamed of the gospel. If he was ashamed of it, I assure you, he would not have been eager to tell others about Jesus. And the question today that I'm posing to you and I is, are we ashamed? Are we eager to share the good news with others? It's a confronting question. Are we keen to tell others about Jesus? Or are we too ashamed? So what does it mean to be ashamed? Well, really it means that you're embarrassed by something that you've done, or you don't want to do something because you fear that you'll be embarrassed if you do it. Now, I've felt shame many times. Many times. I'm going to give you a few examples today. I'm going to ask Heidi to come and join me. But, it all started for me. My first memory of shame. No, I want you to come up. Yep. So, this is my first memory of shame. I'm 5 years old. Some of you would have heard this story before, but I'm 5 years old, and it's the last day of the year. Last day of the year, pretty excited, and the teachers decide that we're all going to get to make little paper chains. You know, paper chains, used to get the little strips, and we'd glue or stick the pieces of chain together, and you'd make all these chains across the room to celebrate Christmas. And they said, and we were so excited. And they said, all you got to do first is everyone just blow up one balloon. Just got to blow up one balloon, then you get to move on and have all the fun over there. And we're going to stick the balloons up around the room. So, of course, we decided we're going to blow up a balloon, me and the other kids, so let's go for it. And so Heidi and I were going. And I kid you not, I watched kids do this for 2 hours. And in that time, I could not blow up one stupid balloon. Not one. And the teacher said, I'm sorry, you cannot move on to the next stage until you blow that balloon up. Thank you, Heidi, you can now leave. As I just watched, every child would just keep leaving and leaving until it was just me. It was just me trying to blow up a balloon. I tell you what, I was so ashamed. I did not for a long time ever try to blow up a balloon again. It was so embarrassing. I'm 28 years old, and my wife's father says, come, let's go out, we're going to go play a game of squash. And I thought I was pretty good at sports. I said, sure, I'll take you on. You're 55, I'm 28. I don't know if you know much about squash, but we played 3 sets of it, and I got 1 point. 1 single point. He was 55. I was 28, playing in sporting teams. I tell you what, I never played with him again. But he was good. He never said anything. He just said, well done. It's probably because you haven't... Yeah, please don't go on. Go on. I'm 13 years old, and I had to do a subject of woodwork. And people that know me know I'm not great at anything to do with tools. Great's probably not even a word that should be used. I'm totally useless at anything to do with handy work. But anyway, they said, we're going to give you a piece of wood and you're going to make it into a wooden spoon. Oh, right. So this is what a wooden spoon, I guess, it looks like it's been handmade actually, but this, because it's not quite perfect, but this is what I was meant to do. I was meant to make one of these. I thought, well, that can't be that hard. Obviously, you're going to do some cutouts and a bit of sanding and all that. Anyway, so I'm watching all these other kids put together what I thought were pretty impressive spoons. And then there was mine. So you know how this side here looks like it's almost the same as that side? So mine had that side there, but one side was down here. So it was like this weird shape. You could almost use it as a bottle opener. And I knew that my dad was pretty good at woodwork and tech study stuff. There was no way that I was going to bring... I didn't know how to do it, but I know what it shouldn't have looked like, and how it looked was not right. There was no way I was going to bring it home. Absolutely no way I was going to bring it home. So I brought someone else's home. What made me more ashamed is that it was so good, the one that was brought home, that they took it to my grandparents and said, look what Josh did. If only people had looked at the very end of it, which had the letters BB. It's not my name. So, Bronwyn, if you're watching today, I am so sorry that poor girl never got her spoon. From years 8 to 12, I was so ashamed that my dad was a pastor, I would not tell anyone. My teachers would often ask me, in front of the class, in a public school, where I was trying to have some form of respect and reputation, what does your dad do for a living? And you'd be horrified to hear some of the stuff that I'd come up with. But I remember one time in year 11, my economics teacher saying to me, in front of the class again, what does your dad do for a living? And I really sensed this time that she must have spoken to my parents and she knew. She knew. Because she had that smug look on her face. So I'm going to get you. I'm going to embarrass you in front of everyone. Josh, what does your dad do for a living? Well, I thought, I know you know, but I don't care. I'm going ahead with my lie. So I said, look, he's sort of into counselling, helping people. She went, okay. Had that little smug look on her face. But I tell you what, I was too ashamed. If I'm being honest, I was too ashamed of what others might say or think or do for me to actually tell the truth. All of these situations I spoke of, and I'm just giving you a few, there's so many more, they led to me being so ashamed. And the reason I share these is because you'll notice that in every occasion, it ends up with me doing something that you sort of go, I'm not really proud that I ended up doing that as a result of the shame. Here's the point, shame is very powerful. And it actually can impact our decision making and our behaviour, as I showed you with examples of what I ended up stealing for the sake of avoiding shame, even though that creates more shame. Had I not been ashamed of my balloon blowing ability, I'd probably have kept trying if I hadn't have been ashamed. And if I hadn't have been ashamed to lose at squash, I probably would have played again. You know, if I hadn't have been ashamed of my spoon, I wouldn't have stolen someone else's. And had I not been ashamed that my dad was a pastor, I would have told the truth to everyone. The truth is shame can have power over us, and it can change our behaviour, and it truly can bring out the worst in us. Now let's have a look at Paul. He says, "For I am not ashamed of this good news about Christ." He says he's not ashamed of the gospel. Why not? Is it because Paul is like really sure of himself? He's a super strong dude that's not affected by shame? No. Is it because he's really respected and popular and it doesn't matter what he does because, you know, he'll be fine? Doesn't care what others think maybe? No. He's not being respected. Paul is not at all popular now. The people don't love him. In fact, the people hate him. The people want him dead. Because Paul's out there preaching the gospel, telling people about Jesus, and the gospel is very confronting. It's very black and white. A lot of people don't want to hear that they've sinned and need a saviour. And he knew that many would not respond well and try to shame him to stop saying what he was saying. And shame him they did. Let's look in 2 Corinthians. He's just recalling some of the stuff that's happened to him as a result of being a preacher, of preaching the gospel and speaking about Christ. This is what they've done. I've worked harder. I've been put in prison more times. I've been whipped times without number and faced death again and again. 5 different times, the Jewish leaders gave me 39 lashes. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. Once I spent a whole night and a day adrift at sea. I've travelled on many long journeys. I've faced dangers from rivers and from robbers. I've faced danger from my own people, the Jews, as well as from the Gentiles. I've faced danger in the cities, in the deserts and on the seas. I've faced danger from men who claim to be believers but are not. I've worked hard and long, enduring many sleepless nights. I've been hungry and thirsty, and I've often gone without food. I've shivered in the cold without enough clothing to keep me warm. You know, they shamed him for preaching the gospel. He was cold, he was thirsty, he was hungry, he was poor. Does that sound like someone that's popular? You know, popular, respected people, you don't hear movie stars and all that in this sort of predicament. They put him in prison, they stripped him, they whipped him, they beat him, they stoned him, they intimidated him, they threatened him. Does that sound like someone that has high approval ratings with the people? To the average person, because of the way he's being treated and the fact that they're whipping him and they're doing all these things to him, he's just a troublemaker. And people would go, you know what, he needs to be punished. This guy's obviously, the authorities aren't going to get this wrong. Clearly he's doing the wrong thing. He deserves it. And given the way that he was treated, given the way that they shamed him, I want you to imagine how easy it must have been for Paul to want to give up. Like, with everything that's happening to him. Wouldn't it be easy to go, you know what, this just isn't worth it. Like, clearly I'm not meant to be doing this. I'm actually just going to stop because I can't cope with this anymore. He could easily also have resented all the people that treated him bad, just run away and said, oh, well, if you don't want to hear about God, fine, that's on you. But he didn't. He says, for I have a great sense of obligation to people. Yes, people that are doing wrong by me. I have a great sense of obligation to people in both the civilized world, that is the Greeks, and the rest of the world, which they referred to as the barbarians. Despite the shameful treatment he received from the non-believers, he still just wanted to help them. He could easily have despised them. But interestingly, the way he saw it, he owed them. He felt he needed to share this gospel of love, grace, and hope with them, even though most of them didn't want to hear it. He says in 1 Corinthians, this is the same guy Paul, he says, it's foolish to the Jews who ask for signs from heaven, and it's foolish to the Greeks who seek human wisdom. So when we preach that Christ was crucified, the Jews are offended, and the Gentiles say it's all nonsense. And yet, he kept preaching the gospel. For many Jews, Greeks and barbarians, the gospel was either heresy or it was fairy tales. And so they continued to try and shame him, to force him to stop preaching the gospel. And yet nothing stopped him. And the reason is, Paul was not ashamed. Wherever the gospel is being preached, if there's anything we learn from today, wherever the gospel is being preached, shame will come to attack. If you preach the gospel, if you tell people about Jesus, people will try to shame you. They'll try to embarrass you. They'll try to mock you. They'll try to judge you. And in some countries, they'll kill you. And it's what happened to Jesus. He preached the gospel. He was accused of blasphemy for doing so. He was beaten with rods. He was ridiculed. He was stripped of his clothes. He was whipped. He was tortured and eventually crucified. His disciples, well, they couldn't cope. They ran off. They abandoned him. He was publicly humiliated. Even as he's dying on the cross in agony, they're still heaping shame on him. They still haven't stopped. Even as he's about to die, they're saying, he said he saved others, they scoffed, but he can't save himself. So he's the king of Israel, is he? Let him come down from the cross right now and we'll believe in him. Right to the end. They just keep shaming him, keep mocking him. But what did he do with this shame? Did he give in and say, you know what? You guys aren't worth it. Angels, come and rescue me. No, he didn't do anything. He didn't fight back. He didn't curse them. He didn't seek revenge. Hebrews 12:2 says this is what he did. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. The New King James puts it, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame. Jesus despised the shame. What does this mean? It means that when shame began to raise its ugly head and try to tempt him to stop or tempt him to react in an ungodly way, it's as though Jesus said to the shame, shame, you are nothing to me. I despise you. I will not let you get into my heart. I won't listen to you. I won't be tempted by you. I won't follow you. I'm not going to react to you. I won't let you control me. When I was a kid, I let shame control me. You saw the actions that I took. That is shame taking control. And the Bible says the reason that Jesus was able to do this was because of what was to come. Because of the joy awaiting him, he disregarded the shame. Because of the joy awaiting him. Shame tried so hard to break Jesus. It tried so hard to stop him from obeying God. You know, it took away his supporters. We've said in Matthew 26, the disciples, they freak out in the end. You know, they tried for a long time, but in the end, the shame is too much. And they're really worried and they run. It destroyed his reputation and his popularity as people who originally were following him. The crowds wanted to follow him originally. Well, now crowds are turning on him. They're mocking him. They're slandering him. When they stripped him naked, he was stripped of his dignity. When they shamed him with torture, he was stripped of comfort. They shamed him so much. So why didn't shame win? Why didn't Jesus cave? Why didn't his natural reactions and self-protection kick in? And the answer lies with that which was in his heart. What was in his heart? Well, clearly nothing of the earth. Earthly things were not in his heart because his heart was not focused on being popular. And his heart wasn't focused on keeping his dignity. His heart wasn't focused on keeping his reputation. And his heart wasn't focused on being comfortable. Things of this world. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. His heart was full of heavenly things. His heart was full of the joy that was awaiting him. An eternity of honour with God the Father on the heavenly throne. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honour beside God's throne. Even when Jesus was being shamed, he was unashamed of his God and Father. And the reason for this is because he knew that it's only God that had the power to save him from death. And he knew that it was only God that had the power to seat him in a place of eternal honour. And you know what? It was actually the same with Paul. He had the Greeks shaming him, saying, this guy's just preaching rubbish, doesn't know what he's talking about. The Jews, well, they've taken it up a level. They're going, no, this is not rubbish. This is heresy. This guy should be put to death. This is blasphemy. And what was his response? I'm not ashamed of this good news about Christ. It is the power of God at work, saving everyone who's willing to believe it. The Jew first and then the Gentile. Anyone. Paul was not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ because his heart was set on the joy that awaited him. His heart was on heavenly things, not earthly things. And his heart was also set on helping others receive this joy. You know, we need to know this morning. If we're following Jesus, if we are living for him, you will know that because you will be shamed. You should expect to be shamed. If you are doing the right thing, expect to be shamed. If we're telling others about Jesus, don't expect high fives all around. Expect shame. Expect it. That's what they're going to give you. No matter how nicely you say it, if you share the gospel with people, even if you're just living the Christian life the way that God calls us to live it, you will make other people feel very uncomfortable. And as a result, shame is going to come after you because they're going to not want to feel that anymore. And so they're going to try and do things. Maybe not deliberately or vindictively, but I assure you, you are going to feel that sense of shame. It's going to try and stop you from being who God has called you to be. You might be made to feel. This is what a shame will try to do. It'll try to make you feel like you're judgmental. It'll try to make you feel like you're foolish. It'll try to make you feel like you're wrong, like you're intolerant, like you're blasphemous, like you are brainwashed, like you are old-fashioned, like you are arrogant. It's going to make you feel like you're narrow-minded or even stupid. But you know what? It doesn't matter what is thrown at us. What matters is how we respond to it. We can either fight back, you can judge them back, you can try to shame them back and push them even further away from God, because that's all that'll achieve. You fight back and see how many of them go, yeah, okay, I'll accept God then. Really? Not in my experience. We don't fight back. Instead, we'd be like Jesus and Paul, and we choose to disregard the shame. We choose to be unashamed of the gospel. We choose to be unashamed of Jesus. We choose to be unashamed of living for Jesus by focusing on our hearts on the joy that awaits us in the future, which will give you and I the strength to continue to love others, that's right, even our mockers, love those that are trying to shame us, and it will give us the strength to, no matter what, knowing what's coming, knowing the shame that might come out of it, to continue to tell others about Jesus. Because you know what? They desperately need to hear it. John 14, I tell you what, it's not something people are just going to stumble across. They need to hear it. John 14, Jesus told him, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. There is a very narrow way to do this. And people need to know what that narrow way is. The narrow way is it's only through Jesus that you can have eternal life. So people exploring everything of the world are very unlikely to stumble across this on their own. We have a responsibility, and Paul felt this, and so did Jesus, to tell people about this narrow path. God loves everyone, and that's why Jesus died for everyone. The Jew, the Gentile, and the barbarian. Everyone. The believer and the non-believer. It's so important that you and I do not let shame prevent us from doing what God has called us to do. As a church, as individuals, no matter where we are, it's so important that we do not let shame win. As Paul said, let me say it all again, from start to finish. For I have a great sense of obligation to people in both the civilized world and the rest of the world. I have a great sense of obligation to everyone, to the educated and uneducated alike. So I'm eager to come to you in Rome too, because I know there's a lot of people that don't know Christ there, and I'm keen to preach the good news. I'm keen because I'm not ashamed. I am not ashamed of this good news about Christ. It is the power of God at work, saving everyone who believes, the Jew first and also the Gentile. This good news tells us how God makes us right in his sight. And this is accomplished from start to finish by faith. I don't know about you, but going through those scriptures over the last few days, it's challenging. It makes me a bit uncomfortable. Do you feel a bit uncomfortable? It makes me feel like, man, am I doing enough? How many times have I gone, I know there was this opportunity to share with someone, but I was worried about where it was. I thought, I could be shamed. Anyone relate? It's much easier for me now because I work here and this is a safe place. I can talk to people about Jesus, and I know if you have a go back at me, you're likely to get shamed by others around you. But I know for most of you, you don't work here. Most of you work where shame is very, very real. And if you make a stand for Jesus, and if you tell people the good news, I tell you what, you will be shamed. Now, there'll be different ways that it happens, but you can certainly expect it. I remember when I was working in a public school, I know the pressure of it and what that feels like, and it is very, very strong. It is very strong. God help us. God help us to be strong. God help us to have the strength. God help us to be continually having our mind fixed on the future as we try to help the people of the present. Because there's no other way. Otherwise, shame will win. We will just cave and go, this is just too hard. Let them go. That's not the heart of Paul. It was not the heart of Jesus. It was I've got the 99, I keep chasing the one. We've got to keep going. And can I encourage you this morning? I really want to encourage you. If you want to be more like the Paul and the Jesus, there's two parts to this. Number one, we pray to God and we say, Lord, give me opportunity. But I also say, do not pray that prayer if you're not prepared to do what comes next. Because I tell you what, God will give you opportunity. That will definitely come. But if you pray for that opportunity, you're going to be really ashamed if you then walk away from it. If you pray for opportunity, God will give you opportunity to share the gospel, to tell people what Jesus has done in your life. And if you have the guts to do that, then as Paul found, as you share the gospel has enough power of itself, it changes lives. People will, not everyone, some are going to mock you, but some are going to accept. Imagine if our church is a church full of people that are unashamed about the gospel and about Jesus Christ. How much more of an impact will we have on this community? Just think about that. I really want to pray that we would all go away and really think about how we conduct ourselves at the moment. And yeah, are we prepared to pray that prayer? Are we prepared to say, Lord, give me an opportunity, and Lord, give me the boldness that when the opportunity comes, no matter what the shame, I am going to speak life into those people. I'll leave you with that as we enter into a time of worship.